My sister said I was too stupid to run the family business, and I still remember the way she said it, calm and certain, like it was a fact everyone else already understood. So when I sat at the long oak table and watched her face as our father's lawyer read the will, I realized this moment had been building for 15 years, ever since Diana decided she was the natural heir and began shaping herself into the successor everyone expected. The Wharton MBA, the early mornings in Dad's office, the way she spoke about margins and logistics like she owned them already, while I drifted through community college, dropped out, and bounced between retail jobs that barely paid rent, showing up to family dinners where she talked about quarterly earnings and strategic planning, while I quietly refilled wine glasses and cleared plates, hearing her say things like someone has to think about the future while glancing at me as if I represented everything fragile and unreliable. And when Dad got sick, she moved faster, attending board meetings without being asked, redesigning the company logo, inserting herself into email threads that had never included her before, telling Mom it was just preparation because there couldn't be confusion about who was ready to lead. So when Thursday arrived and the will was read, it felt inevitable to everyone but me. Diana walking in wearing a navy power suit with a leather portfolio embossed with the company name, while I wore jeans and the flannel shirt Dad had given me for Christmas, the one that still smelled faintly like his aftershave. And when Mitchell, Dad's lawyer for 30 years, cleared his throat and read that Diana would receive Dad's personal effects and $500,000, her confident smile didn't even flicker. But when he continued and said that I, Wren, would inherit controlling interest in Holstead Distribution, all company assets, and full operational authority, the color drained from her face so fast it scared me. Her voice sharp as she said it had to be a mistake because Dad promised her the company, Mitchell sliding a handwritten letter across the table, Dad's handwriting unmistakable, explaining that Diana knew the business inside and out, but I knew the people, that I had spent 2 years working the warehouse floor learning names, solving problems, earning trust, and that leadership wasn't about spreadsheets but about who workers would follow when things got hard. And as my hands shook reading it, I remembered the day 2 years earlier when my last retail job collapsed and Dad called me into his office and told me he needed someone he trusted on the floor with no title and no attention, just to watch, listen, and learn who really kept the place running. And I showed up every morning at 6, learned forklifts and inventory systems, handled truck drivers who'd been there longer than I'd been alive, helped Jorge navigate insurance when his son needed surgery, listened when the night shift nearly walked out over unsafe conditions, and brought real solutions back to Dad, watching him implement every single one, while Diana now hissed that it was insane, that I lacked education, experience, and connections, and would destroy everything in 6 months, her voice full of certainty that had always made me doubt myself, until that certainty finally cracked under the weight of what Dad had seen long before either of us understood it. That night, my phone exploded with messages, texts from Diana demanding explanations, voicemails from Mom pleading with me to reconsider, but the next morning I drove straight to the warehouse because routine was the only thing keeping me steady, and Raymond, who had been there 34 years, nodded at me like nothing had changed and said quietly that my father knew exactly what he was doing. So by noon, I called a meeting with senior staff, heart pounding as I stood at the head of the table until Diana burst through the door uninvited, accusing me of pretending to be CEO and insisting these people would never respect me, slamming a folder down and spilling out emails, financial records, and contracts I had never seen before, deals Dad had supposedly made that bent regulations and shifted money through questionable accounts, her smile cold as she threatened federal investigations unless I signed control over to her, telling me I was too stupid to stay in my lane. And as I stared around the table at people who had given decades of their lives to this company, I noticed the timestamps on every document were from the past 2 weeks after Dad got sick, realizing slowly that these weren't his deals at all, that she had created them as insurance, calling her bluff by asking Raymond about distributors he had never heard of, watching Jorge point out incorrect account numbers, listening as Mitchell confirmed he had never seen any of it, the room closing in as the truth became undeniable, and Diana backed toward the door with no allies left, storming out when Mitchell warned he would report the attempted fraud, leaving behind a silence broken only by Raymond's quiet chuckle that Dad would have loved this moment. And before continuing, I want you to pause here because stories like this only reach the right people when you support them. So if you're finding value in this journey, take a second to like the video, subscribe for more real stories like this, and comment below what you would have done in my place at that moment, because your perspective matters more than you think. And as the meeting resumed, I realized I didn't know everything, but Raymond walked me through reports, Jorge explained routes, Patricia showed me the real books, and by the end of the day, I understood why Dad chose me, because I knew who was getting married, who was grieving, who needed better lighting or better coffee. And when Diana tried to undermine me over the next week by calling clients and board members, every single one stood by the company, forcing a confrontation that would decide whether we destroyed each other or finally learned what Dad had been trying to teach us all along. 3 weeks into my tenure, the real test arrived with a renewal meeting for Brennan Industries, our largest client representing nearly half our revenue, and after days of preparation, I received a late-night call from their VP warning me that Diana had approached them about starting her own company, only to reassure me they weren't interested because my father's integrity and our team's consistency mattered more than titles. And after sitting alone in Dad's office staring at a photo of him surrounded by employees laughing at the 25th anniversary party, I realized the hardest challenge wasn't clients or numbers. numbers, but figuring out how to deal with my sister without tearing our family apart. So I asked her to breakfast and slid a job offer across the table for VP of Business Development with clear boundaries, honest expectations, and room for her strengths, telling her it wasn't pity, but smart business, because she understood growth and finance while I understood people and operations, watching her wrestle with pride, anger, and grief before finally signing days later and stepping into a partnership neither of us trusted yet, one that was tense and combative and exhausting as she questioned every choice while simultaneously bringing in new clients, renegotiating contracts, and building a 5-year expansion plan that forced me to admit how brilliant she really was. And as months passed, we found balance through arguments, compromises, and mutual respect, learning when to push and when to listen. Until 8 months in, she burst into my office with news of a massive opportunity that would stretch our resources to the breaking point. And when I trusted her judgment and said yes, something shifted between us, leading through brutal weeks of expansion, late nights in empty warehouses, and quiet conversations about Dad and the lessons we both missed, finally admitting that business wasn't just strategy or compassion alone, but the marriage of both, and that together we were stronger than either of us had ever been apart. The Titan expansion tested every limit we had, draining reserves, stretching patience, and forcing both of us to confront our weaknesses as 80-hour weeks blurred together with construction delays, software failures, and staffing shortages, Diana living at the new facility while I split my time protecting existing relationships, until one night I found her sitting on a concrete floor surrounded by blueprints admitting she finally understood what Dad meant about people, not just execution, and that partnership carried us through a year of 73% growth, dozens of new hires, and revenue Dad never lived to see, culminating in moments that mattered more than numbers like Raymond's retirement party, where he said we had become the daughters he never had, Jorge's daughter's wedding where we both made him cry, and the opening of our third warehouse with Mom hanging Dad's old anniversary photo beside a new one of us standing together. Proof that leadership isn't about credentials or perfection, but about trust, humility, and knowing who to ask when you don't have the answers. Because Dad didn't leave me the company despite my flaws, or Diana the money despite hers. He gave each of us exactly what we needed to learn the lesson we'd been avoiding. And every time we argue now about acquisitions or strategy, and she jokes that Dad should have left it to someone with real business training, I smile and remind her he left it to both of us. A truth that turned rivalry into partnership and a family business into something far bigger than either sister ever could have built alone.